Hello, this is Ultra Titan Z, and this is the first episode of my special interest series. Now, a little bit of explanation. I thought this would be a fun series to do because of my special variety of neurodivergence. I have a lot of interests, and they usually stick with me forever. I mean, obviously, I'm still pretty young, but most of the things I've ever really been fascinated with have really stuck with me and haven't really left. Um, so it's kind of ripe for discussion. And yeah, I don't know if I'll come up with a more clever name for this series, but I think we're gonna go with just special interest as the title. But yeah, so I figured we'll go with a very recent special interest of mine that came about, I guess it was like half a year ago or something by now, maybe more, maybe less, which is Pulp Fiction. So we're going to start off with what it is, how I got into it, and why I love it. So Pulp Fiction, I guess what's technically considered the first pulp magazine was the Argosy, which was first published in the late 1800s. But we usually associate it more now with like later ones that came about kind of during the Great Depression, like early 30s, like The Shadow here. And it was just very cheaply made, mass-produced fiction published on pulp paper, because that was cheap to make. And, a lot of people consumed that because it was so affordable. And it just told very punchy, exciting stories that didn't rely too much on a lot of more, I don't know, high literature type aspects like themes and whatever. Not to diss the medium. I think they can be written quite well, but it's not gonna like mess with your mind. The prose is very much to the point. So yeah, they've got it for all different genres. I know crime is like the big one, but also fantasy, science fiction, romance, historicals, which includes westerns. Um, and yeah, it covers such a broad spectrum of things, and I think a lot of these have been incredibly influential in modern pop culture. I mean, The Shadow alone was a huge inspiration for Batman, along with other iconic characters like Zorro and this Phantom Detective here. This was so. Just so you know, these are reprints. You can get the original pulp magazines there, but I don't like to read them because I think I'd like buy one as a historical piece, but I'm not gonna get into that. I like to read the books I get, so I prefer reprints. This one is more, it's done in like the same formatting, but it's like modern typeface. And then this one is just straight up reprinting everything from inside the original magazine. So you can kind of get an idea more of what that would have looked like. You could see there's like drawings in there, which are pretty nice. But yeah, so that's pretty much what Pulp Fiction is. And how did I get into it? Well, I wanted to watch the Alec Baldwin the the Shadow movie where he played the Shadow. It's not like he made it. He just played the character. But yeah, it's a genre that I really dig. It's got like this, the Art Deco stylings of the period with the film noirish look. Like I think film noir is really great, and anything with the Art Deco aesthetic, because they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, I really dig. Like, one great example is Batman the Animated Series. Just takes really heavy inspiration from, all of that stuff, including The Shadow. You can definitely see some of that in there. And because I thought just the Shadow was a really cool looking character, this masked, scarfed figure with the wide brimmed hat with a billowing cloak, all the great stuff. Um, Also, the covers are always really nice. I just want to say for these. But yeah, so I was looking into it and I was like, okay, I gotta learn about the Shadow now. Like, how do I get into this? Where do I need to experience some Shadow material before I get into it, I learned there were some like comics too, but again, I want to start like in the old days. So I learned about Pulp Fiction that way, and all of the other that just it spiraled from there, and I got really heavy into all these, old I became really fascinated with all the history of all these old pulp characters, as well as in a similar vein, like old comic strip characters like the Phantom, Dick Tracy, uh, Flash Gordon, who I actually have a uh, book here for, which I again I want to get like way more of these, but so far you can see I've got quite a few, and it's this one book here is what I got, and it is glorious art. And this was also because of a similar situation where I wanted to watch the Flash Gordon movie from the 80s, but or no, it wasn't the 80s, from the 70s, late 70s. I don't remember. But anyway, that doesn't matter. Um, the point is, I got into it that way, and then I guess it was a similar thing with the radio shows. I was like, oh, I want to. What's Green Hornet about? And so I, you know, you got you got all those popular radio shows like Green Hornet, Lone Ranger, Gunsmoke, um, and yeah, so it's really funny because like my grandparents used to listen to quite a few of these radio shows back in the day, and it just shows like I love the idea of that like legacy being carried on in the modern day. Obviously not everyone's into this. This is kind of a lot more obscure now. Comics have kind of superseded this, but it's all of these used to be like the huge thing. And I think they're all pretty cool. So why why do I love it? So like I said, I love just the stylings, the aesthetics of this period in like all things. I mean, um, you can see from the art, the covers alone, I think should be enough to get the point across. There's just various. I just brought together some like random ones I haven't read yet that are all here. Um, but yeah, like the Shadow, I think is the best example of what attracted me to it in the first place. So obviously, you can see I've gotten a lot of the crime fighting vigilante superhero type pulps for the most part, but there's still a lot more I've yet to explore. And I do have some from other genres, which I kind of, there's a little bit over here we can take a look at. But yeah, so, and then of course, aside from like how it looks, at least in, I mean, I'm thinking a lot about like what's in my head, right? Because obviously the covers can only take you so far. But once you get in the book, you can kind of envision whatever you want. I mean, well, the language itself is very, like I said, it's very to the point. It's not beating around the bush with what it means. Um, so I really enjoy that aspect of it because it's really easy to pick up and just have fun with. I can very easily envision what it's telling me about on the page, because I know a lot of other books will make that a lot more. It'll kind of like obfuscate that, and you won't have like a clear idea of what you're supposed to be picturing. But these, I think, are very good at that, and it leaves room for a little bit of interpretation, which is fun. Um, uh, the ones I'm taking a look at don't matter too much, but you can see like this reprint um, is kind of on its own is kind of the size of like a chapter book that you might have read as a kid, but it's made more for adults, though I guess, I mean, maybe a kid could read. I don't know what the content is. You gotta be wary, it's, some of the material is dated, even if the stories hold up very well. Which is why it's good to come into this with a historical eye, which is another aspect I'm really into with these, is that like there's a whole historical aspect to these, like about the people who made them and how each like story was crafted. So like these specific reprints by this company have little short historical essays within them, which I just think is awesome. It really like enhances the experience. So again, I've really enjoyed what I've read so far of The Shadow, and what I've read of Doc Savage, who's like James Bond plus Indiana Jones, uh, plus Superman. I think there's a lot of, you will find so much from this character in so many of those characters things. This is also by the same company that published the Shadow one. Again, it's just one thing all these have in common, but especially Doc Savage, is it's just really like sincere and genuine. I mean, a lot of these can be more kind of hard boiled, but Doc Savage is, I think, like the pinnacle of this idea of it, just of this type of fiction. Again, it could just be Kenneth Robeson's style of writing, but I think just, again, because it's not beating around the bush much with the language, so and it's often got a very clear, defined sense of morality, which you can agree or disagree with, right? But basically, the story knows, it's very to the point, and so this one especially, Doc Savage, again, a prime example of that, and specifically this character definitely has a more hopeful feel to him, especially in an era when you have a lot of more of these hard-boiled crime stories, which are great. I love that stuff, but I do also love my hopeful things, and this Doc Savage is among those. Even though it can get pretty intense, it's very it's a lot more just about, I don't know how to describe it. I should do a whole video on just like each of these characters individually. It would take too long to go through every individual character and what they're about. But yeah, The Shadow and Doc Savage, among like the superhero type characters, are like the main ones I'd point to, that really represent the whole genre. And then this is just some specific stories by this author, more science fiction stuff. Again, just another example of how broad the medium is with what it can cover in stories. It's again, I call it a medium rather than a genre, because although they have like similar beats, like it's like these are made to be, it's they're made in the same fashion, but you can have completely different types of stories. And yeah, there's just like so many things about it. And again, this is why it's hard for me to describe why I like it so much, because there's so many aspects of it that I think are awesome. It's the aesthetics of the time period, the historical aspects, just the nature of the writing style. It's all just, it's stuff I really enjoy altogether. So, and they make new stuff too. They make, there's companies that publish modern fiction utilizing these characters, or just inspired by these old magazines. And I do have some of that, some of which I think my regular viewers of the channel might be interested in, which I'll get into in a later video. But yeah, that's about it for this video. Don't want to go on for too long, but yeah, I really enjoyed reading through these. And Some of them can be pretty cheap, these reprints, some of them not so much, but if you can ever, if one really catches your interest, I would highly recommend checking it out, or even just going on a PDF online, or even just listening to like an old radio show, because some of those are kind of similar. I mean, again, it's a different medium, but it does have similar beats from the being from the same time period and of a similar nature in how it's written. So, um, or even like the old comic strips like Flash Gordon, but it just this old variety of fiction I just think is so awesome. And it's if you yeah, like I said, totally recommend you check it out. It's inspired so much of what we love today, and it in itself is still very entertaining as it is. You know, I love taking a break from all the technology you got to deal with in your life, whether you're like sucked into, you know, the algorithms, or it's just, you know, whether it's for work or your education, you got to use it. Breaking open a book that's just easy to read and fully dedicated to being entertainment is a beautiful thing. So that's going to be all for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you in the next one. Goodbye.